All right, so it's 2018 and we're back with the Business of Enterprise IT podcast. We had a little bit of a layoff there for the holidays, and that was a nice little time to sit back and breathe, because 2018, there's been a lot happening, to say the least, within InfoSystems. So, I thought today would be a great opportunity to sort of talk through some of the announcements that InfoSystems has been making and will be making publicly about some new business ventures and some new opportunities, and some of this has been released in local media. We've had some coverage by the Times Free Press here in Chattanooga, and that was very much appreciated, and engagement with the Chattanooga Chamber of Commerce and some other entities. And as of right now, an event that we're planning hasn't happened yet, but by the time this podcast makes the rounds, we will have already held our special launch event where we're making an announcement, sort of what we'll be talking about today. So can you talk a little bit about, there was already a partnership in place between InfoSystems and a partner company, a sister company, let's call it. Mm-hmm. But that has changed in 2018 very recently. So Scott, can you just talk a little about some of the announcements regarding InfoSystems and APSU?
Sure. So InfoSystems and APSU are two companies that about 2.5 years ago, our owner Clay Hales and the owner of a company called APSU Technologies out of the United Kingdom, both of those, both Clay and Steve were on the IBM Global Business Council Advisory Board. So that's a very select group of IBM business partners that their senior executives are on an advisory council. They participate several times a year with IBM, and it's all about providing feedback to IBM on how they're doing, dealing with their channel partners, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of dialogue back and forth around, the things that they're doing to enable the channel to be successful, and it's an opportunity for them to get feedback from their, some of their premier partners, which InfoSystems and APSU were both premier partners. Mm-hmm. So APSU has a 20-plus year legacy in the United Kingdom. They're a UK company, APSU Technologies, and they were an IBM business partner, much like we are, but they also had a very large portion of their business was dedicated to cloud and managed services around the IBM Power mid-range platform. Mm-hmm. So if you think about Power mid-range, you're thinking about AIX, which is IBM's flavor of Linux, Linux on Power, so just open source Linux, but also the legacy AS400, which has been renamed by IBM over the last couple of years, iSeries, which is, these are systems that have been around for years. There are tens of thousands of them in the United States, and they're used heavily in as core systems, transactional systems in larger companies typically, right? Whether it be the distribution industry, trucking industry, a lot of the carpet manufacturing industry has run off this platform for years. And then many of our largest customers, from an InfoSystems perspective, uses the IBM mid-range platform as well. So it's still a very key part of quite a few companies of the Fortune 100, really. It's a key part of their infrastructure and their strategy to support their applications.
I remember seeing a stat somewhere that said a majority of Fortune 500 companies have IBM Power systems in place in some form or fashion.
In some form or fashion. So as this conversation started, one of the things that Steve was looking to do, because they already had a dominant market position in the United Kingdom, which of course is related to the United States, is a fairly small geography. Yeah. They were looking to take what they had learned and some of the assets that they had built over the last 20 years and bring that to the United States and launch a similar business in the United States, because they had done some market analysis and discovered that they felt like there was really a gap in this market here in the U.S. So, long story short, several years ago, I flew over and worked with a gentleman named Matt McCahill, who was Steve's chief operating officer, and Matt and I, basically built a structure for a partnership between InfoSystems and APSU. We hammered out the basic details of what that partnership would look like, and then we engaged Clay and Steve, and they, made some adjustments, signed off on it, and so about 2 years ago, we went into what we referred to as a joint venture. So at that time, APSU launched into the U.S. We share a lot of the back end services as far as accounting, HR, facilities. They're in this building here. They're in our building in Chattanooga. We built a 24/7 network operations center in the back of our building, which is up and running now, staffed as we speak. And we have been supporting them in launching that business here in the U.S. Now, they are different from InfoSystems in the aspect of they're a channel-only provider. So they work through other partners to provide these services around the United States. So we're working through some colo providers. We're distributing through the distribution channel, and we're partnering with other companies like InfoSystems up in the Northeast, up in Minnesota, up in the New Jersey, Boston area, and really across the U.S. we're rolling this capability out. So we've been at that about 2 years, and within the last several months, there was a venture capital firm that was involved in the UK, and they had a desire, because they had sold off, Steve had actually sold off the UK division to actually his largest competitor, but he's still a stockholder of that as well, but he exited the UK business, and really that was done to focus all of his attention here on the US market, because he felt like that obviously much larger opportunity here in the United States. So as part of all that transition, what's happened here over the last several months is we have stepped up and taken a much larger share of APSU. In fact, it's an equal share at this point. And all of the operations and the services that were being delivered out of the UK have been transitioned over, so it's now a US only operation.
Yeah.
And so as part of that transition, my role has changed with APSU, where in the past I've always been a board member, but it was really more of just a board position and then advice and counsel. But since this transition has taken place, I'm now Chief Executive Officer of APSU. So I now have ultimate responsibility for that business. And then I'm also obviously still involved in InfoSystems as Executive Vice President here, working for Clay. So this is a partnership that is going very well. Our business is growing exponentially, and we feel from an InfoSystems perspective, it gives us tremendous capabilities that we would not have had should we have tried to start from a standing start. Yeah. What we really did is take a 20-year proven model that had been running in the United Kingdom, and we simply replicated it over here. And so we have hit the ground running, and we have significant business revenue already, and it is growing at a pretty rapid pace. And it really gives us the ability to offer our customers cloud solutions that go above and beyond what most providers can offer.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess initially it made a whole lot of sense for InfoSystems to help APSU get established here, because even as a separate company with very little crossover, because their technology was a very unique offering that would add to or enhance what InfoSystems could do for our customers in the U.S.
Absolutely. So I mean, again, their kind of their core offering and what differentiated them from just other cloud providers in the marketplace in the UK was their ability to provide IBM mid-range capacity in the cloud, right? And so that's unique here as well in the U.S. to a certain extent. I mean, if you look at at just x86, open systems cloud, I mean, they're everywhere, right? You've got all the hyperscalers we've talked about in previous episodes, and they have their benefits and their challenges, just like any business does, but they don't really offer, IBM mid-range services in the cloud. It's a different platform, right? And so it was a great fit because InfoSystems has sold those devices and designed and implemented and supported those IBM mid-range environments for years. So it was a perfect marriage, really, because of all of the depth of design, implementation, and consulting skills we have around that platform, and the fact that that's really the core of what they build off of. So they didn't have to bring their reseller business over. They only brought the cloud business over. And so we're actually filling that role of providing the equipment, doing the design, implementation, and supporting the infrastructure. And then they're layering over, their expertise, which is really, 20 years of knowledge, scripting. They have a tool that they call Maximize, which is it's an owned asset. It's a systems management tool for the IBM mid-range platform, which has over 20 years of development, and it enables them to monitor and manage a tremendous amount of systems with a very efficient level of resource, right? And that particular, the Maximize tool is still being developed today. I mean, there are still developers on staff. So as we engage with clients, in that way, if a client has a need from a monitoring management perspective that is not inherent in the tool today, chances are that we can, very quickly assess the need and let them know that the answer is probably yes. We can probably add that functionality to the tool, and the tool comes along with the service, right? So if you engage with InfoSystems /APSU for the IBM mid-range cloud, I mean, the Maximize comes along with it, as well as the 20 years of experience in delivering cloud services in this space.
So before we really kind of go deeper into some of the technology and the operating systems and stuff, I think it's good to point out that from an economic development perspective, this was a great thing for Chattanooga to have a net new company, tech company, founded right here, and like you said, sharing the InfoSystems building with their own dedicated space. But as APSU grows, they're going to be hiring IT specialists. So it's great for the community because it's bringing in good jobs for the Chattanooga community, probably good news for the local Chattanooga State Community College, the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, other surrounding universities who are really looking to help, entry-level IT specialists or their students get that entry-level job. And there are a lot of those positions available within APSU, and opportunities that advance into very highly specialized and highly paid IT careers. And I think it's also important to sort of differentiate between InfoSystems and APSU as a business operations perspective, because other local people in Tennessee and Chattanooga and Knoxville, Nashville, the places that already are aware of InfoSystems, may need some additional insight on what's the difference between InfoSystems and APSU.
Okay.
So I think, and you can explain this in more detail, but InfoSystems is really still the regional IT partner that we always have been.
Absolutely.
APSU, on the other hand, like you mentioned, is a channel partner. So they're going to be taking the technology that they own and looking for other InfoSystems type companies around the U.S. to be their regional partner in whatever footprint those companies have. Can you kind of talk a little bit about the differences in business operations, strategy, and services between APSU and InfoSystems?
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. I mean, InfoSystems, has been in business 25 years as a value-added reseller here in East Tennessee, primarily serving Nashville, Knoxville, Chattanooga, North Georgia, the same areas we've been in forever, and nothing changes there. I mean, that our focus on that business is is as high as it's ever been, and that business is growing. I mean, we had the biggest year in 2017 that we've ever had from a revenue perspective. So, and we're adding staff. Okay, we've added several folks here over the last couple months. So that's good news for Chattanooga. It's good news for the local market. It's good news for employment, and we expect that to continue. APSU is different in that it is really a nationwide play, right? So, you know, again, when you talk about something that's distribution, what I mean by that is APSU will not hold contracts with end users. We subcontract to other partners like an InfoSystems. And in fact, through InfoSystems in our geography, we can sign you up for APSU services, and that's how it works. But we've onboarded a customer in California, right? That we're delivering their production and their DR environments, you know, on equipment that is owned by APSU, sold by InfoSystems, located in Tennessee, supported by, you know, employees that are located in this building here in Tennessee. And, you know, we've got opportunities in Texas, Minneapolis, New Jersey, you know, Philadelphia, Boston. So these, there's probably about 375 existing customers already that are being supported by APSU out of this building across the United States. And you know, I know that when I was walking down here to do this podcast, there's an interview going on upstairs right now for an additional position that we need.
Yeah, that's great.
And APSU, I believe, is up to 19 employees, and that's so 0 to 19 in 2 years is a good thing. And most of those employees are here in Chattanooga. We do have some in the Northeast, a few, but I think there's 4 up there. The rest are here. So, you know, APSU is a complementary business to InfoSystems and vice versa. We support each other. We complement each other well from a offerings and a skill perspective, but we are dramatically different in how we go to market, what channels we go to market, and what our channels are, and how we support those channels.
Yeah.
But that's okay because it was designed that way. But the good news for the local economy here in Chattanooga is it's creating, you know, a company that, you know, will you know, very quickly be in the multi-millions of dollars of revenue, right? And is providing a great employer and a great tax base for Chattanooga market.
Yeah, and so you mentioned how InfoSystems and APSU are really complementary, and a big reason for that is because InfoSystems is a very high-level IBM partner. We do a whole lot of other things with a whole lot of other vendors, but you brought up when you were talking about APSU in the first place, the IBM Power, which can run multiple operating systems, IBM I, AIX, Linux, and other operating systems. But because InfoSystems has such a highly expert background in the IBM Power ecosystem, this is an amazing crossover tool for us to be able to offer an entirely new set of services and solutions for the companies who run that platform. So obviously APSU will want to work with other IBM partners like InfoSystems around the country. But can you talk a little bit about, because, you know, and this is where even I'm somewhat knowledgeable about IT and terminology, and I've had so many discussions throughout my, you know, coming up on 10-year career in marketing in the IT industry. But there's a line of demarcation that I get to where beyond that I'm in unknown territory, and I can no longer hold an intelligent conversation. When you get to those operating systems, the IBM I, the AIX, my understanding is that traditional cloud services that are often provided through local companies like an InfoSystems, there are other local cloud providers in our market and other markets around us. There's some limitations there on what they can offer for those IBM I operating systems, or the IBM I and the AIX operating systems. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Why is it that those have less available out in the marketplace as far as hosting opportunities, cloud services, the managed services. And what is it that APSU has that really allows us to offer those services that previously weren't available here?
Well, I think it's a couple things, right? I think if you look at, the IT market, to the landscape today, I mean, it's clear that, what we would call x86, right? Back to the Intel days, and but that's really the dominant platform that people run off of today for from a market share perspective. However, when you start looking at larger companies, and it's not always large, but when you start looking at companies, when you start looking at their, what we call their systems of record, right, which is the core applications that run their business. I mean, obviously the banking industry, right? The banking industry is still dominated by the IBM mainframe. It is, okay? Now, it's a very expensive machine, and it's very specialized, but at the end of the day, it's extremely reliable, it's extremely secure, and it's extremely scalable. I mean, it has the ability to do transactions at a level that x86 just cannot handle. So there's a place for that in the market.
Yeah.
And then when you step down from a mainframe and get into what we call the mid-range market, which is where IBM Power sits, I mean, some of the largest clients here, companies in the Chattanooga area, rely heavily on this platform. The carpet industry was built on the IBM mid-range platform from a manufacturing controls perspective and scheduling perspective.
Yeah.
You look at some of our largest clients, InfoSystems' largest clients in the Nashville area. I mean, they run tremendously large SAP environments, and Oracle environments, and those often will sit in larger companies, will sit on the IBM mid-range platform. So it makes perfect sense that folks that were developing this cloud ecosystem would go after what I would call the low-hanging fruit, right? And the low-hanging fruit is x86. It's Microsoft, VMware, Linux on x86, and that's fine. And there's certainly a place for that. And just like we've said, there's a place for the hyperscalers. We've taken a little bit different approach with what we call our production-ready cloud, which we've already covered. But so the reason I believe that people have not stepped into the IBM mid-range cloud space sooner than they have is it's just the evolution and the maturity of the cloud marketplace overall, right? So they're going to start and they're going to cast the widest net they can, right, and the biggest pond they can to grow their business as rapidly as possible. But as that part of the market, you mentioned there's a lot of cloud providers out there, right, that have those skills. As that part of the market starts to become saturated, then, what happens in a free market economy is people start looking for areas that are underserved. And so this is an area that we clearly saw as underserved, and working with APSU, we brought a solution to bear that was mature and ready to go day one. And based on the start we've had in the rapid growth of the pipeline, and which has driven employment and everything else, it's been a pretty good move. So the reason I think more people haven't gotten into it as well is it's a very highly specialized market. There's not near as many resources out there that understand the IBM mid-range platform in general as do open systems.
Yeah, for every one IBM mid-range specialist, there's probably dozens or hundreds of Windows specialists out there.
So it's a different skill set. The machines are more expensive, and they typically it's just they fit a different niche in the market. So that's kind of why we've went the way we have, and I think that. And there are some players out there, I mean, and that have been out there, before us into the marketplace. I think what differentiates us from them, and there's not any here in the Chattanooga area, but is that a lot of those firms will use what we call second user, resold equipment that's not new. They'll put it under third-party maintenance. They certainly don't have a tool like Maximize that is a 20-year developed product that is specifically designed around monitoring and managing workloads in that environment. And where we're different is just like on our production ready cloud, we're buying all new equipment. We're putting it in a certified tier 3 data center. We're putting it under manufacturers, maintenance, manufacturer software support, and everything is new and it's all supported by the manufacturers. There is no second user equipment in our environment. It's the same way in the mid-range for APSU. We're buying new IBM equipment, IBM support, hardware and software support. It's in a tier 3 data center, and it's done in a way that it is ready for production level workloads. And so, and that's expensive. I mean, in the 2 years that we've been underway here, we've already spent in excess of $2 million on infrastructure to be prepared to support these workloads. So, but it's put us in a position where some very, very large companies are now counting on us to deliver disaster recovery services, cloud services, high availability services for these workloads.
Yeah. So just kind of thinking back over the history of the kind of the local cloud provider market, I remember when, the first things you started to see were things like hosted exchange. And that was before the Office 365 days. Obviously, you probably see Office 365 more than hosted exchange in today's world. But the most common small business applications were probably Windows-based. And so, yeah, you're right. It made sense for the local provider to offer cloud services around those applications first. As you get into more specialized businesses, larger companies, and you mentioned Oracle and JD Edwards and SAP, and when you start talking about ERP platforms, there's a lot of ERP providers out there that offer enterprise grade or mid-market grade ERP platforms that have to handle a lot of transactions, have large databases, and they're business critical.
Right.
So typically those are not things that people were looking to put in the cloud anyway. Probably another reason why local cloud providers weren't really playing in that space is because it's probably a much harder conversation to have to say, put your email in the cloud versus put your business critical ERP that runs your entire company in the cloud. So, but production ready cloud, by nature of the name, should give some insight to the people who are listening to this. Production ready cloud is insinuating that this cloud offering is more geared toward those business critical workloads and applications. Do you have any info or insight to add into
I mean, I think it's the maturity of the market, right? I mean, when this whole cloud phenomenon started, and I think I've mentioned in previous podcasts, I mean, we've been doing outsourcing for 30 years, right? I mean, we've been running workloads for a monthly fee for companies for a long time. IBM, was obviously big in that marketplace. Obviously Ross Perot's company did so. There were lots of firms out there that did that, right? And cloud is the evolution of that type of a service. And with technology the way it is today, and where you can provision capacity on the fly, and you can dynamically move workloads around, and you can expand and contract environments literally within minutes, generally, depending on the platform. As this started to come to fruition in the marketplace, most companies would do what you would expect them to do, and that's to say, okay, well, I'm going to start off with my non-mission critical workloads, right? I'm going to put my toe in the water, per se, to see what it's like. And so they start off, for years, we would talk, well, we'll put development and test up there, right? Or we'll put non-mission critical web servers up there, or we'll put some internal applications up there to where if they're down, it's only impacting us, it's not impacting our customers. But that's that was 3 or 4 years ago, right? Or maybe as much as 5 when those conversations were having. So as companies have started to kind of test the waters and put more and more workloads up in the cloud, they've gained in confidence, right? And the cloud's become better. Technology's getting better. I mean, we've all heard that technology, the rate of churn in the technology industry is, it's exponentially increasing because we're now using technology to design technology, and it's getting scary, frankly. The whole artificial intelligence and the things that the scientists are working on today, and the things that are frankly being implemented are just amazing. Yeah. So it's to the point where I think the confidence level is there for the business leader that says, okay, so I get it. It really doesn't make sense for me anymore to continue to invest in high cost infrastructure that I'm going to put in one of my facilities, which probably in a lot of cases, in some cases, larger companies it is, but in the mid-market, it's not a purpose-built data center generally. It might be a special room, and it might have, some extra air conditioning, or, you may have a generator out back, but you're not going to have 2 generators. You're not going to have, 2 more air conditioners than you need. You're not going to have 2 UPSs, and so like a real data center, right? So it's time in the maturity of the marketplace where customers and executives are starting to really be at peace with it's time to move to the cloud. And it's not just development and test. It's not just my non-mission critical stuff. They are actually seeing that if I move it to the cloud, I can actually have better availability because I'm in a real data center. I've got people running my infrastructure where they're experts in that particular environment. And my people they're maybe great people, but they're not, level 3 experts in all the technologies that I need to make my business run. So the paradigm is flipping. And if you look at some of the predictions by some of the industry analysts, they're saying that in 3 to 5 years, by and large, the traditional, on-prem compute is going to be, could be gone, right? Or significantly reduced. Now, some of the very, very large companies, again, the banks and some, Fortune 50 companies, it's going to be a while before those really large data centers go away because they're building their own clouds. They're big enough to build their own cloud, right? But in the mid-market space, I think in 3 to 5 years, you're going to see a very large percentage of businesses are going to have moved their workloads into some sort of as-a-service model where they pay monthly and they're getting a guaranteed service level of availability and performance.
Thanks for tuning in to the Business of Enterprise IT podcast. Due to the length of this episode, we've decided to cut it in the middle so that you don't have to spend such a long amount of time listening at this point, and you can pick back up when we release the second half later. Thanks.